emotion is energy in motion, and it's going to move you or it's going to keep you where you are. And it's really up to us to decide what that is. But being an empath, like just embracing the fact that I don't have to work as hard in this area as other people, because I got to work hard in every other area of my life. So just, being present and being open and being a safe space for others, that's something you can hang your hat on and be empowered by.
Hello, my loves, and welcome back to Create Your Life. I am your host, Simone Leah. So I just wanted to let you guys know that today's interview is actually an interview that I recorded about a year ago when I ran an online event called the Soul-Led Entrepreneurs Summit. It was a really, really, really wonderful event. I had some beautiful, amazing speakers talking about things like connecting with your intuition and how you can use that in your business, how to do Facebook advertising, how to do marketing as a soul-led entrepreneur, all of these cool things to do with business, entrepreneurship, and actually also spirituality and connecting within. And so these interviews were so wonderful that I really wanted to be able to share them with you now. So if when you're watching this, you see or hear the word soul-led entrepreneurs, this is still the Create Your Life show, but these interviews were just too good for me to keep to myself any longer. So I really, really, really hope you guys enjoy this interview, and I can't wait to connect with you again soon. Hello and welcome back to Soul-Led Entrepreneurs. My name is Simone and I am your host. Today I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Tiffany Lindley from Epiphany Lane Counseling. It was such an amazing conversation. So I feel like as people start to become more aligned within their soul and they start to really feel and flow through that place of alignment, they start to open up. And through that opening up, you can sometimes start to take on and receive more information than you actually realize you're actually receiving. And so you might start to notice that where you used to be able to walk into a room full of like crowded people and all people bustling around, and that used to not be a problem for you, you might find that now you feel quite drained from that. And so I wanted to really hold a conversation with someone. I think Tiffany, being a counselor, is the perfect person for that, because she sees these sort of things every day, that what it actually means to be an empath or highly sensitive, what that can look like in your world, and the ways that you can kind of protect yourself from taking all of that information in, and knowing that it's not your information, knowing that maybe you're feeling sad where you weren't 5 minutes ago, it's not actually you who's feeling sad. So we have a really great chat about what being an empath can look like, but we also do touch on how it can be used as a superpower within your business, especially if you're someone who works one-on-one and is a coach or a counselor or a healer or something like that. How understanding those abilities and those empathetic gifts, how that can actually help you and become a superpower that helps you to help more people, really, which is what we're all generally here for when we are doing something like coaching and counseling and healing and stuff like that. So it was a really great chat just for those people who might be new to feeling into their alignment, or they might be noticing shifts within themselves, or they might have been this way for years, but no one had ever really given it a name. Hello and welcome back to Soul-Led Entrepreneurs. My name is Simone and I'm here with Tiffany Lindley from Epiphany Lane Counseling today. How are you, Tiffany?
I am wonderful, Simone. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm excited. I don't even have words yet.
Yay.
I'll have a lot of words later though, so don't worry. The interview will be be sufficient.
It's all good. I'm super excited to have you here today, because today we're talking about a topic that some people might consider to be that little bit woo-woo, but I think it's a really, really important topic for the soul-led entrepreneurs. And the topic today we're talking about is staying grounded within yourself and not wavering from your truth in your business, in relation to when you start to really connect in with your soul, you might find that you become more sensitive. You might find that you have heightened senses, you develop empathy, or like you become empathetic. I don't even know if that's the right word for it, but you become an empath without even necessarily realizing what's going on. So it's going to be a really, really great conversation today with Tiffany, who can help us actually understand what is happening if we start to become more sensitive due to that new connection to self, or that connection to self that we already have and don't realize that it is us being an empath and picking up on other people's stuff. And so I really can't wait to jump in with that. But I would also like to just start with the question of, what does it mean to you to be soul aligned in business?
All right. Thank you so much for that question. When I found your information, it was like, yes, this sounds exactly like the kind of things I want to be a part of. But to be soul aligned to me is to be walking in your values, walking in your purpose, towards, experiences in your business that make the values make sense, because values aren't goals. They're just kind of the framework that we want to live our lives on. It's the framework that we choose, and then society is the one that we don't choose. And so how do we reconcile with these things that are valuable to us to with the things that the world says is supposed to be valuable? And I think that's what it means to be so aligned, is that I can take what works for me from the world in the structure of business and all of the ins and outs and technical things that it takes, but then the values, the things that I want to put into the world are always on the path with me, and they kind of go together as you walk through your business in your daily life.
I literally love that. Thank you so much. So if someone has started on this journey to become soul aligned and they have noticed, or maybe they haven't noticed, that they're becoming more sensitive, would you be able to just explain what some of the things that could come up, or some of the traits are of someone who is highly sensitive or who is an empath?
Okay. So, someone that would be considered an empath, it's basically you feel before you think. Your emotions can be very sensitive to the environment, to small changes in the environment. And you're not like, I'm looking at a person and I'm, analyzing them. It's not like that. It's like, feels kind of weird in here. Or even just when someone approaches you, it's like sometimes you're very open to that, and sometimes your guard goes up immediately. And of course, there's tons of reasons, psychologically speaking, of why we might have these guards up, but or have these sensitivities. But in general, with an empath, you're not trying to understand how someone feels. You just understand it, but you don't understand the why. It's more of like, I understand the what the feeling is, but I don't understand why the feeling is. Whereas most people, um, they have to understand the what and the why. Like, you have to tell me what it is because I can't understand it. That's why it's so hard to, you have to teach empathy. It's one of the few emotions that you actually have to activate on your own versus it being a reaction or a response. But with an empath, it's always the reaction or response, is that I feel what someone else is feeling. And then most of us will take that extra step. And that's where you get those empaths that are just, they're such a good helper. You're such a good listener. People just tell me things. Like, I don't ask them. They just tell me things because I validate their feelings in that moment. And they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, you're so right. And blah, 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 blah. And it just bombards you with their information. You get the what, the why, after you've already acknowledged the what. So yeah, so being an empath or highly sensitive is more like sensory based. So your five senses, hearing, taste, touch, but you are very sensitive to what's happening in the physical environment, which is a type of empath ability as well. Is just that, like, I can't do fluorescent lights. It's probably a combination of being an empath, but also being ADHD, and it's just too much stimulation. So things like that, where sensory things, sounds, smells, tastes, certain fabrics can make you highly sensitive as well. So that's more of a neurological thing. But sometimes those things can interact, and then you have this empathic ability with this highly sensitive person. And I guess going back to the business piece, where you're like, okay, you're starting to be more aware of the purpose of your business and why you're in it, and you become more sensitive, you become more aware of the people you're working with, and what's happening in your industry and things like that. It can show up as anxiety most of the time. most of the time it's going to show up as worry and sometimes even panic. Like, I don't want to go to this, networking event, not because there's a pandemic, but because, I know who's going to be there. And the last time I interacted with this person, and it's not necessarily trauma. It's like, I don't know. It was weird vibes. And it'll show up as anxiety and worry, or worrying about other people excessively and not being focused on the things you have to do, or doing things at your own expense for the comfort of other people. So it can show up in a lot of different ways, a lot of counterproductive behavior, or intense emotion that seems kind of too intense for the situation. Like, okay, it's just a networking event, just go. But for some reason, your energy is just super duper high. I guess hopefully that's a clear example of, what it looks like when you're in a practical situation, but when your empathy is high and you're not sure why.
Yeah, no, that's definitely great. And I think it's important to mention that, yeah, you might have always had those traits, but you might not have actually realized what they were, or that they were not what everyone else is feeling. Because I know there's a lot of people around me who are like around people 24/7, and they're always going and doing things, and and like they just function that little bit differently because they're not taking in so much of that external stimulation. So being an empath or someone who's highly sensitive, it might not be something you even realize you are. But over time, as you've become more soul aligned, you've just noticed that you're becoming more sensitive. And where you used to be able to do things like go out in big crowds, you're feeling the effect of that so much more now, you know?
Right, right. Especially if you suppressed it, because we're taught to suppress it. If you were a sensitive child, most likely someone told you to stop it, and you figured out how to adapt to that. And as you get older, not out of lack of ability, but just more of fatigue. Like, your spirit gets tired. I'm tired of doing that. Like, I'm tired of suppressing who I am for the comfort of other people. And so it can be, like you said, something that hides in plain sight. I mean, myself, I'm very extroverted and assumed that I was an extrovert for many, many years. And then I get into graduate school and start studying. And I'm like, ambivert? What is that? Somebody that, has extroverted traits can be extroverted, but then needs to recharge just like an introvert does. Because most extroverts are charged up by the people they're around, and empaths can too, especially when it's very similar energy. So like, even our conversation, Simone, so far, like, we just jumped right in. It wasn't like we were strangers at all.
Yeah.
And that gives us both energy. We're both excitable, but then both of us will probably go to sleep at 10 o'clock or whatever, 2 hours from from now, due to the exertion that it takes to kind of be in that energy. Um, so yeah, it's interesting that we can go so long in our lives and assume other people are like us because we're able to see the other person so clearly. It's like, oh, clearly you wouldn't do this if you knew how I felt. So I'm just going to keep doing this thing, and then hopefully you'll remember that you know how I feel. Versus, like, this person has no idea how I feel. Like, and just accepting that, where it's like, I know how you feel, and you feel, and you feel all the time. So it can be very confusing, and something that we just suppress because it can be seen as a weakness in a lot of places, especially when you start being competitive and get into academia and business circles specifically. Showing your feelings is not really rewarded.
I just love that you literally just mentioned my whole life. It's just been one of those things where I'm just like, oh yeah, they know how I feel because I know how they feel. And you don't even realize that they, like, you just literally spelled it out then, that they just genuinely have no idea. So I literally love that.
Mhm.
I don't want to, like, I'm going to go off topic if I keep going down that rabbit hole. But what I want to talk about now, because I
Mhm.
do think that empathy is a massive superpower, but let's talk about the person who's just starting to become aware that they've got that empathetic power, and they've just started to feel like that overwhelm that kicks in from being able to receive all of that extra information from the external world. How does someone start to really not get overwhelmed and exhausted by that extra energy coming through.
Okay. So now that you know that there is energy coming, you have to protect yourself. So boundaries and grounding are kind of the ways to do that. There's tons of techniques. It's basically, our brains, when we think, it's a combination of feeling and thought happening simultaneously, right? And so if my thoughts are negative or self-defeating, it's going to conjure up even more self-defeating emotions. But let's say I'm getting energy from someone else that's not mine. Something you can do is grounding yourself mentally and thinking of something that's completely unrelated to what's happening right now, because then your brain will separate from the feeling temporarily enough for you to be able to examine. I was like, is this my stuff? Why do I feel so irritated? And if you can cut off the kind of the transmission in a way, and then be able to look at it, then you'll be able to see what's your stuff, what's not your stuff. And then when you have kind of these psychological boundaries, um, they kind of come after that. So whatever techniques you use to kind of ground your spiritual self, whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga, whether it's, exercise, self-talk, journaling, like you do those things to kind of create these boundaries and barriers to know who you are. So the awareness of self is the best protection, because that's what helps me as a therapist, to be, especially working with kids whose energy is so pure and powerful, and not turning into like, this vigilante that wants to hurt any parent that's ever hurt a kid, which early in my career when I was training, I was like, okay, so I just can't fight everybody. No, you can't protect everyone. But knowing who I was, the more I learned who I was, the easier it was for me to see other people still experience what they're experiencing, but be able to give that back to them as validation, and then all the counseling stuff that I do. And so for yourself, as you're learning, okay, I'm off, but I know that I can't tell why I'm off. So let me just disconnect from it for a second. So again, meditation is a great way to do this, where you're just watching thoughts pass, watching feelings pass, and you're able to see, okay, that's unfamiliar. you know, Tuesdays, I'm usually in a great mood because I get to do my favorite thing. But this Tuesday, I was not in a good mood. Who did I? And then your mind's eye might see that person that was over in the corner, just slumped over, and sometimes, so you protect yourself, you recharge by reflecting. I mean, that's not reflecting, you recharge by disconnecting from the charge, the emotion, and making sure that it's yours or not, and then you can reflect on it. So that's what I would encourage for people that are trying to learn how to manage this new surge of energy that they're aware of, versus working so hard to build up the boundaries and build up the walls, the emotional walls, right? So going from more of a very firm and thick boundary that is good when you numb your emotions, right? The good stuff doesn't get through either. And so we have to have some permeability so that the good and the bad can come in and they can come out because they can get stuck in there too, right?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think that's so important. I think because if you don't actually understand what's happening to you, your first instinct might be to put all these boundaries up. But if you want to be soul aligned, there's a part of you that really wants to be expansive and open. And so when you're going and putting all of these, like, I need a protective wall against this person and this person and this person, it's actually going against your actual nature of being expansive, which is what you want when you're listening to your soul. And I think it's really interesting to note that it is just through that awareness, as you mentioned, of like maybe you've just walked into a room, for example, and it could be physical or it could be emotional. And you walk into a room and you know that when you were in the car, you were fine. And you walk into a room and you're like, oh, I've got such a sore shoulder. Like, where did this come from? And then you feel like, oh, wait, hang on. I don't think this is my shoulder. And just through that awareness, you can just let it go. And you're still
Yeah.
open and expansive, but you're not holding it. You're not carrying it. It's the same thing as you said. It could just be a person who's got a low mood in the other corner of the room, and you could pick up on that. So it's definitely through that awareness that I think that it's going to really start to help moving things forward. So do you
Yes.
think that there are daily practices that someone can do to help them become more centered and strong in their own self-awareness?
For sure, for sure. I'm not a great meditator as far as I'm a meditation teacher of any kind, but I have incorporated meditation into parts of the things that I do, and prayer, depending on your faith. Those are great ways because you're talking out the things that would cause you stress and would cause you, you know, to feel these feelings for yourself and experience those feelings. And so then when the new emotions come in, you're like, okay, no, I've already kind of let that go. And same thing with meditation. I'm watching these things pass. I'm not reacting or responding. I'm just being in the moment with them, and you'll recognize yourself. But when you don't know who you are, that's what makes it scary. That's what makes it overwhelming. And overwhelmed for me, I use the analogy with my clients is, say your emotions are like, guests in your home that stay too long sometimes. Like you love for them to come over because you need them to do things. If I'm not anxious, I'm not going to get up and be on time. I need that anxiety to, strategize and all of that good stuff. But then when it gets too much power and it's at the front door and it's like the bouncer in your house, anxiety is the thing that you're filtering everything through. And then you have anger coming in, then you have depression coming in, then you have confusion coming in, and it's way too many. Like the party is no longer fun, right? It's too many guests at the party. That's kind of what overwhelm is how I describe overwhelm for my clients. So they don't feel fearful of it. They see it as, okay, I've got to unpack some things, I've got to let some things out, I've got to let some things pass through because it's stacking up too high. So yeah, overwhelm is something. It's not something to fear, but it's something to be aware of. It's something to, once you recognize it, you got to do something about
it. Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. And I love that, yeah, as you mentioned, just getting to know yourself and your own awareness of, well, no, I let that go already. So as I was saying before, like it's not necessarily always you. And so where I think this is really interesting for a lot of business owners is, yeah, if you're going to a networking event or if you've started coaching and you're dealing with clients, I think definitely coaching and one-on-one, it would be very good to be able to have that awareness of, oh, that's not mine, or that is mine, or, and I think even as well, sometimes you just know things without even knowing them. And I know that you're talking a lot about seeing things going past. And I also see things, hear things, feel things, all of the psychic stuff is turned on there. And I feel like it probably is for you because of the language that you're using. Say someone has become more soul aligned and they are becoming more open. Are you finding in your work as a counselor that there are people coming who probably don't even realize that they're picking up on psychic stuff as well?
Yes and no. Usually I try to ease my clients into that. you know, I get dreamers, I get people with precog, I get people with like you were describing the shoulder pain that have, physical empathy, and they can, physically feel other people's pain. And so I guess the more they get used to the language, the more you get used to kind of speaking in these terms, number one, you just have to believe. If you don't believe, it's just going to be dissonance cognitively. Your brain's going to reject all of these things, and who knows what you could be getting from the things around you because you're blocking it out. And that takes energy to block it out, but it takes less energy to accept. And then, because acceptance doesn't mean I have to hold on to it. And I think that's what a lot of people get afraid of too. It's like, well, if I accept it, that means this has to be who I am. And no, it's just a state of being. Like, okay, this exists and this is present and this is something that I'm experiencing. And the thing about experiences is they change. So you accepting that, oh, I'm getting information from places that are not coming from me. Is that possible? Yes. Okay. Now that I've accepted that, how do I use that for myself? So yeah.
And I mean, and I do think it's probably important for me to put this little disclaimer in. Obviously, you would had the same thing with being a counselor, and obviously, psychologists and that sort of stuff. It's not about you having a one-on-one client picking up on their whole life story and then going and throwing it back in their face. but you might actually be feeling something or hearing something that's actually going to help them. So say, for example, someone who isn't switched on is seeing a client, they might not pick up anything. But if you're switched on, you might feel, oh, okay, this person's actually feeling a little bit of resistance to this at the moment. And then you
Mhm.
can use that feeling of resistance to kind of go, how do you feel about that? Or recite it back. It's not something that you're going to ever throw back in someone's face or use against them. It's just that heightened little level of extra awareness that you
Mhm.
can use if you are with someone who's one-on-one in a consulting or a coaching or a healing space or something like that. It's not, yeah, it's definitely not something that should be used in a crossing boundaries type of way. But
Right. You're a
if you,
mirror.
yeah. And if you are someone who is taking one-on-one clients and you are picking up on this sort of stuff, what would you say to them, to the psychologists and the counselors and the coaches? What would you say to them if they're starting to notice that they're getting more information?
Well, as far as like how they can apply it, it's all about the relationship, right? That's what we all learn. Is that relationship is really where the healing happens is within the relationship, and so you definitely don't want to impose the information on the client if you're not seeing the openness there. And like you said, just asking those questions, curiosity is our biggest strength in all of these practices. I mean, even with mediums and everything, asking questions is where the discovery happens. And so um as long as it's not giving you like, it'd be different if like you're physically feeling something like painful, or I mean, I've got nauseous in sessions before because of clients anxiety, and just asking the question, not having the assumption. I think what we fear also with our empathic gifts a lot of times is that we're going to become some kind of charlatan, or you know again, the arrogance, the haughtier than, and because, and it's like it's counterproductive, it's counter to our nature. The reason we even exist is to make sure that there's space for people to be. And so I definitely don't want to crush anybody else's existence having this ability. Like, but I can see how you could turn that into a narcissistic type of thing. Again, that's the societal influence that would even make that possible in your mind. But most empaths are naturally wired to avoid that at all costs, and making it like giving empaths confidence and giving them the tools they need to have self-esteem and again love themselves deeply and truly is can be difficult because they've been so used to shrinking for so long because they're afraid of being this imposing force because they have these abilities. And like again, it's that epiphany, that awareness that that's what you're having, in this adult space of your life where you're using this in a solo line business. It's like, I've always known this about myself, but have I accepted it about myself? Have I used it to propel myself? And that's where people kind of get that conflict of like, okay, I know this stuff, but how do I use it? And I say just a little at a time and be curious, because you're the beauty of intuition is we question it more than anything. But when we're like in our emotions or in our logical mind, we will believe what anxiety says every time. Oh, that's going to go terrible. That's anxiety. You're like, okay, yeah, let's act like that's true. But it's like, you know what? This is going to be a great experience. Are you sure? I don't know. Intuition, we question every time. But when it's when it's truly anxiety or truly like depression or any type of, negative emotion, or just, something coming from our cognitive self, we don't question it. We just charge ahead, right?
Yeah.
And anytime I let clients know that, they're like, "You're so right." It's like, I'm not saying it to make you feel bad. I'm saying you to become aware, and you can continue to question your intuition, because in that, if that's your signal, that's your signal. Like, okay, I'm having a conversation with myself, with my mind and my spirit are having a conversation. That's what intuition is.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, how can people, like you said, there's some tips and tricks and ways that people can empower themselves with those gifts? How can people really start to trust that and empower themselves with what's coming in?
Okay. Protective strategies, protective strategies, protective strategies. There's so many. A lot of them are, again, awareness based. One of my favorites that Dr. Judith Orloff talks about in her book, so Empath Survival Guide, is return to sender. Return to sender. That's not my stuff. Because again, it's a beautiful moment when like you read the room and you just connect with the person and you're able to kind of bless them with what your gifts are and see them and have them be seen, and oh, it's great and it's nice and happy. But then sometimes people are not, they just want to dump. They just want to dump and leave it in your plate. And it's like, oh no, return to sender. And I think that's where overwhelm comes from a lot of times, is that you have several people dumping. There's lots of different types of relationships that are just antithetical to empaths being successful. Of course, the narcissist, the over talker, uh, the woe is me person, the person that kind of thrives on um, drama and being the center of conflict. And we're all about resolving conflict, because that's what emotions are for. It's to make you aware that there's a conflict somewhere in existence. How can I resolve it, and how can I let it propel me to the next thing that I need to do? So return to sender is one good strategy. Taking care of yourself, of course, self-care, what you eat, what you drink. Water is your friend. Most empaths love nature in some capacity, whether it's being by the beach or being by the lake or just being outside with the trees, because nature doesn't judge you. And so, you know, spending as much time in nature as possible is a great way to just protect yourself and kind of quiet the environment around you. Um, Sleep. And just knowing where your triggers are, again, that awareness piece. So like airports is a big one for business people that are empathic. um Masks have been kind of a godsend for some empaths, being able to protect your mouth, protect other people's mouths, so they can't really literally drop their energy into you with their voice. Sitting too close to people. And again, you may feel like you're being skittish, but in the beginning, especially when you're just learning how to create your psychological boundaries, creating more physical boundaries is going to be a way to protect yourself. So protection is super, super important.
I think that's really great, because it's not even so much like, as you said, it's protection, but it's not actually protection against a threat. It's just an awareness of protecting your own energy and life force. It's just
Mm-hmm.
knowing, okay, well, this is going to make me feel better if I don't allow every single person on the planet to hug me when I meet them, and there is nothing wrong with not allowing hugs
You're
from
not mean.
everybody.
You're not a mean person.
Yeah.
You're not mean. That's one
So,
thing that I hear everyone. They're like, I just don't want to be mean. Be mean, because it's not, because you don't mean to be mean.
yeah,
That word is so ridiculous to me. You're
but
being
it's
kind because you're doing what's the best for the situation.
and it's not even mean to have
Kindness to yourself.
have your own boundary of just going, I just don't hug people I don't know very well, or I just don't sit touching someone I've just met, whether, like, if you sit really close to them and they're touching your leg and you're touching their leg, and it might be completely innocent in a business setting or whatever, but you might take that on. So, it's not actually about you being mean. It's just about you knowing, all right, cool, this is what works for me. I've got that awareness of that. I just need to be more conscious of my environment, like, not in
Mhm.
a, you're never going to be mean, you know.
Right.
Um,
That's not the intention at all. But yeah, you're right. Like being able to know, it's like you're saying, that the expansiveness you were talking about earlier, the more powerful you get as an empath, then you do have more space that you can allow more people in. But even with that, just know what the repercussions are too. Like, okay, when I'm at my limit, this is what it looks like. And then the next thing you would do is do the recharge. So that's where the self-care, that's more restorative comes in. Because, yeah, drinking water, eating right, sleeping, that's kind of bare minimum. But after you've had to exert yourself, because you just have to, even with myself, like there's some days of the week I have 4 or 5 clients back to back. That next half of day in the morning, I need to be looking at, words and numbers, and I need to like disconnect from human people because I need to recharge, whether that's me reading something or affirming myself or listening to music or things like that. So knowing, how you recharge and what really works for you and not having shame about that. Because, you know, especially when you love nature, I'm a person of color, I'm a Black woman. And so there's even like this movement where Black women are going and hiking and going out into nature. And it's something that's kind of judged in our culture. And it's like, why? Like every culture had outside time that we all started outside and then we learned how to make shelter. So being able to be proud of the things that work for you helps you be able to recharge faster versus you trying to convince people why you need to do this thing. Especially if you have your own business. Like, I need 2 days off. I need to go on this retreat. I need to, I'm going hiking this morning. I'm not taking any calls to the afternoon. Whatever you need to do to recharge, being confident that that's what works for you and that no one can judge you for it.
Oh, I actually think that is, like, you touched on something even so relevant today, is boundaries within your business in relation to social media, phone calls, and emails. It is okay not to have your business 24/7 right next to you. I personally, for me, literally my whole life, I think I'm just old fashioned. I won't call people before 9 a.m. and I won't call them after 5:30 p.m. unless it's one of my best friends and I know they're totally comfortable with it. And I definitely don't call people on weekends,
Mm-hmm.
and that's me. So for me, if I had a business that ran 24/7, and I was always on my phone checking things, I would just burn out. So I think even having that awareness and going, it's okay for me to not be 100% accessible is huge.
Right. And it looks good for your business. We operate on a societies, and so you being unavailable is attractive to your clients. I've gotten more clients the less available I've gotten. And it's not a manipulative thing. It's just a function of you taking care of yourself. And people want the thing that they can't always get. And we're so used to being, I know a lot of empaths that are just way too open. And you really do need to have, clear channels for yourself so that you can protect, your core, your center.
Yeah. I love that. I do also, because I don't want to run out of time, I want to talk about how can people use these empathetic qualities as a superpower as a business person.
Oh man, there's so many ways. And so, like I said, we're talking about coaches and people that work with people one on one specifically. Again, being confident in your recommendations, being confident in your uh, just knowing, like, okay, if you don't feel like it's working, like it's just in a consultation, giving the person permission to keep looking, like, and being in a way where it's not like I'm trying to say, well, I know, well, you're not a good fit for me. I don't need you. It's more of like, I hear your story and I am very, I'm really connected to it, but I think someone who does blah is going to be a much better fit for you because I don't want to miss that. Like, there's so many great things that I could help you with. And even just saying, this is what I could help you with, but this is where my expertise stops. And I think this is what you need more than this. So giving those great consultations and recommendations, empaths are great at that. Because again, it's a short amount of time, so you're not going to have to like fully pull down your boundaries, but also you kind of going in and out of spirit and mind. Like, okay, I'm going to my knowledge and my expertise, but I'm leading with my heart, and the client's going to be able to see that like that. I mean, that I know the moment when somebody's going to book that session and I get off that consultation call and there's an email, the session's been booked. Or the clients are like, okay, they're not going to book because they're here and they're not seeing me here, and that's okay. Look, I don't take insurance right now. So that's one of those things. It's like, hey, but I will work something out for you. Like, those people I know I can work something out with, I'll say it. So even if you are willing to move some of your boundaries for a person because they might be a light person that's put in your path to help you grow. I see some clients like that, like, okay, yeah, I haven't really worked with this in this capacity. I will make an exception for you and see if you're there. But sometimes they're not there. They're not aligned with you, but you're aligned with your purpose. And it's more of like a test of like, are you willing to go a little bit further for this particular thing, even though you're not quite confident with it? So not only will it give you the ability to like perform and be confident. It also gives you the ability to take more risk and be comfortable in that risk, if that makes sense. Because you're not really comfortable, but it's like, again, that ability to accept, because you see how people are. You see people at their core, which is the things that hurt them, the things that motivate them. And so if they weren't motivated enough, I don't have to make it about myself. Like you don't self blame as much, because you know kind of where that person's coming from. And the boundaries after a while start to create themselves. And it's like, hey, it is what it is. I wish you all the best, but at this juncture in our journeys, we're just not crossing, and that's okay. So being able to accept a lot easier, being able to get those connections quickly, and also being able to know when it's not a good connection, and trusting that, and not feeling that regret after you tell someone no.
I literally love that. And because I think that when you're soul aligned and everything is centered and yeah, just aligned within yourself, you're going to be putting out the frequency for what you want to attract, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
something does come in and you do get that feedback, you can literally just look at it and go, okay, well, why did I attract that then? And you can kind of go, oh, okay, it was to test if I still have that boundary in place or not. It's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily like your alignment's out, or like, it's literally sometimes it's just to
It's a muscle.
yeah. Yep, it's just a little bit more extra feedback for you. So you can go, yep, cool, I'm not ready for that. Or someone might come to you who is a little bit different to what you normally do. And you're like, all right, let's try this out. And you might try it out with that person and go, yeah, actually, great. Now I do want to move in this direction that I've always said no to before. So it's just
Mm-hmm.
kind of knowing that within yourself, whatever you're attracting, there's actually even a reason for it. And so you can just take that feedback. It might be that it worked, it might be that it didn't, but it's feedback either way.
Exactly, exactly. And I love to say that, emotion is energy in motion, and it's going to move you or it's going to keep you where you are. And it's really up to us to decide what that is. But being an empath, like just embracing the fact that I don't have to work as hard in this area as other people, because I got to work hard in every other area of my life. So just, being present and being open and being a safe space for others, that's something you can hang your hat on and be empowered by.
Amazing. Now, if someone was starting to feel like they are more empathetic and they are trying to run a business and all of that sort of thing, do you have three top tips you would recommend for them on their journey?
Well, yes. So some of the things we've been talking about already, learn how to protect. Once you're aware, learn how to protect. I'm not saying build a moat and fortify the walls, but just know where the walls are supposed to be, so that you have a separation between yourself and the outside world, and really learning yourself in that protection process, and then recharge. So once you are drained, know how to refill yourself, know how to get self-care. Sometimes that's through relationships, sometimes that's not. Sometimes that's through communal with nature, sometimes that's not. And knowing those processes, and living and being present when you are recharging. And then thirdly, reflect, like you were saying, the information, the feedback. I tell my clients all the time, feelings aren't facts, they're feedback. And so being able to reflect on that feedback, that experience you had, that person, making those mental pictures of like, yes, when I see that, I can trust myself to know that I know what I'm talking about, or know what I'm seeing. And and even if there's other contrary information, if I continuously reflect, I'm going to glean so much more from those experiences, without you know becoming arrogant, without becoming inflated. It's a grounding thing, honestly. And so yeah, so those are the three tips: protect, recharge, reflect. If you can do those things, you can align yourself, align your soul with your abilities, and be, more effective.
I love that. Thank you. And do you think there's any resources for someone who is starting to feel like they may be this more sensitive direction?
Oh, yes. So, like I mentioned her earlier, Dr. Judith Orloff, she's a medical physician who is a very powerful empath, and she is very candid about her struggles as an empath throughout her life. but also she gives the book is The Empath Survival Guide, Life Strategies for Sensitive People. She does a great job explaining it. She gives you neurological background, like, hey, we're not just making this up. This is not so woo-woo. There's neurological evidence to show that there is actually energy passing between people. The cultural aspects of it, and all of the different strategies, relationships. She covers so many important topics. So if you're going to read anything, I mean, I literally did a counseling group just using her text and other texts to help my clients really embrace and be empowered by their empathy and their empathic ability. So definitely would recommend that book, and it's an easy read. And she, again, so many strategies on how to take care of yourself.
I literally love that. Thank you. And it does just bring up a last question that I do think it's important for us to touch on. So you just mentioned then that there is scientific evidence on the fact that energy goes between us, so that this empathy, it is a tangible thing. Do you want to touch on that a little bit, and the fact that it's also everyone can touch, like we're not special, everyone has access to this.
Right. Yes. Special in that we don't have to work for it as hard as, maybe as someone who's neurotypical. That's, again, as an ADHD person, I kind of bridge these two gaps of like the way I'm wired cognitively is different, and the way I'm wired spiritually is different, being an empath. But the mirror neuron system, everybody has it. Every baby has it. That's why, one baby cries, all babies cry. Our brains will mirror the neuronal firings as another person's brain. And then magnetic fields. We talk about chakras. That's the scientific explanation of that, is electromagnetic fields that are passing all day, every day. It's how we have TVs and radios. It's natural magnetic energy that's in the earth. And then emotional contagion, like I mentioned, it's mirror neurons is what it is, in your brain, but then emotionally, it's very easy to, like, that's how you get mob mentality. Emotions spread. It's energy in motion, right? And then with people that are empathic, we're more sensitive to dopamine. So you're going to get, it doesn't take as much to feel happy. It doesn't take as much to feel sad. So if I'm picking up on somebody else's happiness, just like how our excitement transferred immediately when we started talking, it doesn't take much. And which helps me as an ADHD person, because I'm always chasing dopamine, so so that's a good thing. And then a fifth thing is the phenomena of synesthesia, where there's people who have sensory processing, crossing, see colors, hearing colors, seeing sounds, that kind of thing. Because there's this wire crossing, they're able to kind of show how, you can have an experience that is not related to what's happening in the moment and it still be valid. And that's kind of what we are doing a lot of times. It's like, I'm not even paying attention to this person, and I'm having an experience that they're having in my mind that I logically doesn't make sense until we look at the other things. So yeah, there's a lot of great research out there about it. And all those phenomena, are just what we do naturally. The earth is full of magnets. We're full of metal and full of water, and we're of this place. And so it's a beautiful thing to know that we can share experience this way.
Yeah, I love that. And like the fact that we do all have, you can strengthen these gifts, if you want to. I think that the statistics on it, there's only like maybe 5% of the population will admit to being an empath, but there's so much more of a higher percentage that if they chose to, and if they built that awareness and practiced with that muscle, they would have access to the same thing. So, we are special in the way that we're aware of it and we're using it, but there is so much opportunity for anyone who wants to tap into that connection to self and source and those gifts that can come with that. So thank you for going on that little tangent with me. But it has been so lovely to talk to you today. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Well, I'm on the internet, social media. My company is called On Epiphany Lane. That's my name on Instagram. On Facebook, I'm Epiphany Lane Dallas. On Twitter, Epiphany Lane DTX. And then I'm also, you can find me on LinkedIn, just Epiphany Lane Counseling or On Epiphany Lane. On Epiphany Lane is the LLC where all of my mind ideas will go as I think of different things for the business. I kind of put them under that umbrella. And so, yeah, I am www Epiphany Lane Counseling. That's EPIPHANYLANECOUNSELING.com. We spell it a little differently here in the US. So make sure I spell that out. And yes, I do speaking, I do workshops, I do trainings. So, if you have those kind of needs for your business, I would love to connect. And even if you just want consultation, as a mental health provider or something like that, I'm definitely open to that as well. Um, so yeah, that's how you can find me. Epiphany Lane and Tiffany Lindley. They're closely sounding the same for a reason. Make it easy to remember.
I love that. That is so great. Yeah, I didn't even realize. And then when you said it, then I was like, oh, they do have
That's
similar.
what my name means. Like that's what Tiffany
Really?
means. It's epiphany, a revelation. Comes from the Greek, and it's based off the Christian feast of Epiphany, which was like Christ reappeared. Epiphany, but revelation is what it means, and so I definitely lean into that heavily. That's my soul alignment, which is why I found you, how we found each other. So.
Ugh, I love that. That is amazing. I did not know that. That is so cool. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's been so wonderful to chat to you today, and I'm sure everyone's got so much value out of it.
I hope so. Thank you so much, Simone. This is wonderful. I learn by teaching and I teach by learning. So I am just, grateful that there's spaces for people like me out here in this world, because just seeing so many people come so defeated, it encourages me to keep doing what I'm doing, and that I'm not just making this up, It validates my experience as well.
Easy. Thank you.
Thank you so much.